This is now the 5th phase of answering the call to do more with your life. And in this phase, we're in the vulnerable space of starting something new. And I call this phase the separation because when we're in this vulnerable space, we might find ourselves having to turn away from some of the more negative influences in our lives. And this can be a tricky thing to do. So in today's video, I'm going to talk about how to let go with love. In my previous video, I talked about the importance of having healthy boundaries and what these are and when you might need to use them. And in this video today, I'm going to talk a little bit about how to operate those boundaries. When we're letting go of people that we're close to who are causing a negative influence in our lives through their behaviour or their actions or whatever they're doing, it's never easy. And sometimes, it is actually easier if we're feeling quite angry towards that person or we feel like we hate them. And, and it's quite natural to feel like that when somebody really hasn't lived up to our expectations or really let us down, or they're causing us a lot of pain in their behaviour or the way they're acting. Anger and hate, are okay for a while. They're really natural human emotions, and actually they can protect us and help us to get that distance perhaps. But the problem with anger and hate is that they can turn into resentment. And resentment is really not a useful place to operate from. Resentment can become just as destructive. And if we're harbouring resentments, then we're just kind of really still connected to the negative influences in our lives. So I learned about the concept of letting go with love through the 12-step program of recovery, which I've been in and around for most of my life. I'm the child and the sister of alcoholics and addicts, and I'm also in recovery myself. So the 12-step program has had a big impact on my life. And as I said, the concept of letting go with love comes from the 12-step program. So letting go with love, what does that mean? Now the trouble is with love, it can be really tricky to kind of operate this and put this into practice on a day-to-day basis, because love can be quite a difficult concept to really get to grips with. Now, we've got people in our family, perhaps, or people close to us, and we love them, but we hate them at the same time. Or we're supposed to love them, but we don't feel like we love them. So we're not really sure what love is there and what love isn't there, and how to really work around this concept of letting go with love. It can become very confusing. And when I was writing my book, Your Whole Life Economy, I was really greatly influenced by this book here. It's called The 21 Skills of Spiritual Experience by Cindy Wigglesworth. And I really like the way she talks about love. I'm just gonna read it out here. So she says, love in the English language is a very vague and imprecise word. We say, I love my children and I love pizza. I needed something more precise than this, more measurable. One day I came across a definition of love from the East that reads, love is a bird with 2 wings. One is compassion and the other wing is wisdom. If either wing is broken, the bird cannot fly. So what Cindy Wigglesworth has done in this book is she's really captured these skills that we can develop and build within our lives in a very practical way. And I really like this concept, so I brought this into my book. It greatly influenced my book, and I talked about the resources of wisdom and compassion in my book. But you see, when we get confused about letting go with love, what we can do instead is we can think about letting go with compassion. And compassion is a much kind of easier concept to operate when we're dealing with these kind of scenarios and we're dealing with people who are, causing great pain in our lives, and we need to let them go because they're holding us back. So we can do that with compassion. Now, what does it mean to let go with compassion? Now, for me, this is how I understand it. So when I let go with compassion, I understand that the person who is causing great pain in my life and not living up to the expectations or behaving in the way that I want them to behave, perhaps, as I said, in my family, we've had a lot of suffering from addiction. I've had to deal with a lot of the impact of that. And it's a very difficult thing to let go of when you see a person that you love actually really hurting themselves and causing a lot of pain and destruction, not only to themselves but to everybody around them. So letting that person go is really difficult. But the way to do this, one way to do this, is through empathy, really. So compassion and empathy are very closely related. So what I try to do is understand the bigger context of this person, what they're doing. It's not all about me. It's not really about me at all. It's about them. They're in a lot of pain. Whatever they're doing, they're probably in a lot of pain and having a great lot of difficulty themselves. So often, particularly around addiction, people don't want to behave the way they're behaving, but they're powerless over that. So letting go with compassion is letting go with an understanding of their frame of reference, of where they're coming from and the difficulty and the pain in their lives. Or perhaps parents, who've really not lived up to expectations and done what they needed to do. I mean, whichever parent ever does. But, understanding that parents mostly, this is the understanding I had to come with my parents, is that they did the best they could. I mean, often the best that they could do was not very good, but, it was still the best they could. And actually everything that I've been through has made me the person I am today. So that's a real strength in recognising that. So compassion and empathy go hand in hand. So it's a lot about really recognising where that person's coming from. Taking myself out the picture is not about me, it is about the other person. And that really, you can really understand how that concept of letting go with love is a much nicer place to operate from for ourselves. I'm just going to finish off here talking about forgiveness, because forgiveness is also another really difficult concept to often get your head around. And again, I really like the way Cindy Wigglesworth talks about forgiveness. And just to say, in my experience about forgiveness, again, it's one of those things that people don't forgive because it protects them, and that's fine. Nobody says you have to forgive somebody that's hurt you, but we forgive because it helps ourselves. I'll just read out what Cindy Wigglesworth says about this. So what is forgiveness? Forgiveness is not about forgetting what happened or saying the behaviour or event was okay. It does not let a perpetrator of abuse off the hook. In fact, it's not even primarily for the perpetrator's benefit. Forgiveness is seeing a situation with new eyes. We do this as a gift to ourselves. Refusing to forgive is toxic. I heard this analogy somewhere. Refusing to forgive someone is like drinking poison every day and hoping that eventually the other person will die. So again, this is what I'm saying about, when we're holding on to resentments, and I've heard that analogy in relation to resentments. It's like taking the poison ourselves and hoping the other person's going to get hurt. Because like I said, these kind of, difficult kind of negative emotions, they can be good for us, they can protect us, but we have to be really careful because we can get really stuck in them. And I think as human beings, we're naturally kind of really drawn towards what's the negative kind of emotions because they do protect us to a certain extent, and it's a real challenge to work to get through those and work from a positive side. But we do this for our own mental health and our own well-being, and to be able to operate more effectively ourselves. It can be a real challenge to really operate this, as I said, in the context of a person who has caused you pain or is causing you pain. But after a while of practicing, it becomes more natural, and you really start to really feel it. You start to really feel that empathy and that compassion for the other person. So there's just a few thoughts there about how to work with boundaries. It's really about looking after ourselves in these relationships with other people, as I've said before. And what we're aiming for here is to get into a really effective position to operate so that we can make the most of our lives, and that's our responsibility. And that's what answering the call to do more with our lives is about, really. It's about getting in that position where we can do more and do good work. So in my next video, I'm going to talk a little bit more about what it means to be in this phase. And I hope you will join me for that.